Welcome to the virtual version of the International Film Festival and Forum on Human Rights. I'm Catherine-Lune Grayson, and I have the immense honor to speak with Aziz Muhamat, who was the 2019 laureate of the Martin Ennals Awards for Human Rights Defenders. Aziz fled from Sudan in 2013, and he ended up spending years in the Australian offshore immigration system. After the boat he was traveling on was intercepted by the Australian authorities, he was sent to a detention camp on Manus Island in Papua New Guinea, along with hundreds of other refugees and asylum seekers. In 2016, he started using a smuggled phone to send 30 seconds voice messages by WhatsApp to a Melbourne-based journalist. Over time, he sent nearly 4,000 messages to report on his experience. These became the basis for the Messenger podcast, a powerful, immersive account of exile and of how a policy of offshore processing translates into the life of one individual. Aziz became one of the few public voices among the hundreds of men held on Manus Island. In 2019, he was finally granted asylum in Switzerland. Good evening, Aziz. Thank you very much for being here.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
The discussion is titled "The Voice of the Voiceless," and it asks who should be given a voice to speak of people's experience and suffering. In short, do we need celebrities to shed light on other people's plight, or can people themselves speak for themselves? And this will guide the conversation tonight. Before we start, know that you're all invited to send questions, and that we will be taking some questions towards the end of the discussion. Aziz, you said before that you were surprised to realize that people knew very little about Manus Island and Nauru. And because of that, I would like you to start by situating people. I would like you to start by explaining a bit what's happening on Manus Island. What did you find there when you got there initially? What were the conditions? Because that will also lead into a discussion about why was it so necessary to speak about what was happening there.
Well, thank you very much first for having me once again, and it's such a great privilege to share some of my knowledge that I had when I was incarcerated on the detention center for quite a long time, like 6 years. And based on your question as well, the idea of why people know little about it is because the world were shocked when they see the wave of the refugees or internal refugees and displaced people in 2015, and which dominate the international media platform, and mostly in Europe here, people were, the only thing that they remember is about the wave of the refugees and migrants back in 2015. So it comes to a moment when Australian government was one of the government around the world that they decided to build up a detention center which is operating out of their own territories. And Manus Island and Nauru was one of the, couple of places that which situated in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, like, no one knows about it. And also the reason why people don't know about it is because everything was restricted. Journalists were not allowed to come to the place, and not even the staff member who were part of that system were not allowed even to report out of the center. So that left us, we as an individual who is incarcerated in that place, we found ourselves that our voice are short. We are not able to send our voice to people outside of that place, and also we are not able to communicate because all the communication line is being cut off. Speaking of the situation on the island, if you ask me to rephrase it or even to make it shorter for the public to understand, it's just like living in a hell. And among the people who live together, we live together in that place, we prefer to be in prison rather than being in the detention center. Because one of the things that why I say why prison is because in prison you know how long you're going to be there. In prison, you know, at least you know the time frame, and also you can utilize that time to build up something for yourself. But in that place like Manus Island and Nauru, you are in a deep hole. And that hole, it's full of misery, torture, and trauma. And that hole, every time you're trying to crawl out of that hole to just, push your hands out and ask for people to grab your hand, you feel like there are some people who are like just pushing you down. You don't get a way to say anything or even to save yourself. Conditions. In terms of, speaking of the humanity, we lived with the guards from the special or like private sectors such as G4S, Wilson. We had G4S and then it changed to a Wilson security guard and then it changed to a Paladin, and it's just going on and on and on and on. Because each of those peoples, once they come, they have no clear idea of how they can build up a bridges between the vulnerable peoples and themselves. And the only image that they had is like these people who enter our country illegally, and they deserve to be treated like that. That's how they they interpret their behaviors. And every question you ask, even if your personal name, the answer is no. Because individuals there are not referred by names. We were not referred by names. We were referred by a number. And it's also make me that to think more deeper and deeper in terms of the numbers. Why do we need to use a number to refer human beings when we know that those human beings are they are similar, as you, and they are capable to do what you do. And I start thinking about, what happened in the history way back to the concentration camps. That's the only time when people being referred by number. And that was, many, many decades ago. But now we are in 21st century, where is still people referring by numbers.
I find it striking that you make the parallel with the concentration camps, and I think anyone would, because the question of numbers is very reminiscent of that. And you're saying that was a very long time ago. However, I think that when you look at refugee experiences, you have similarities across decades. And when we first spoke, you were talking, and I mentioned this reminds me very much of Hannah Arendt, who was a refugee of a completely different era. But what she was describing in terms of losing your voice, losing your identity, is very, very similar to what you're describing decades later. So I think there is sadly a very strong connection between those refugee experiences. But very early on, when you arrived in Manus, it became extremely important for you to be able to speak out. You tried to get hold of a phone, you tried to reach out to people. Why was it so clear to you that you needed to be able to engage with the external world? Because you took great risks to be able to speak out. You were not meant to be able to reach out to the external world.
Well, shortly I can say, when you have the ability to do something, you better do it. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you. And I found myself in a situation where I speak the language and I have the key that will guide me to communicate with the rest of the world. So what else do I need to do is I need to take the risk. And then taking the risk is you have two things to do. Number one is you have to lock your emotion toward even your family. Put it in a tiny box and throw it behind you. And then you have to lock your personal needs. As a human being, like your personal need, you have to put them aside. You have to stand there as a human being, but with no hopes and with no future. And all you have to do is, even if you're going to lose your life, you need to communicate with the rest of the world. And what really, really encouraged me to do that is because when I started this initiative back then in 2013, after my arrival, 2 months after my arrival, I realized that we need to do something. If we don't do it, no one else is going to do it for us. And if people today want to do it for us as well, there are so many people out there, they want to help. They want to speak in our behalf. but the voice is not very strong. So the difference is when I tell the stories and when someone else tells the story, there is a difference. People listening to me as this is speaking, that I went through these 6 years of my life, and now today I'm standing here and I'm trying to, help. And it's the same thing that is the same as this when he was there on that island like 6 years ago. He took the initiative to be in the front line, taking the bullets, rather than just other people taking the bullets. You be in the front, take the bullet to protect everyone behind you, and then look for other risky and dangerous situations to try and send your voice out. And I was punished for that. But the good things for me was that at the moment, I was very well prepared. Because I was very well prepared and I was expecting the punishment to come to me. So which means I wasn't like afraid, and I know even the reason why they want to punish me is to break me down. But they just make me strong. They forgot that every time they push me hard, rather than making me weak, I feel like I'm just getting strong. Every day I wake up, despite we were not used to see strange people. We were not used to communicate with the strange people. We were only used to communicate with our friends, which you know them. You see them for every day of every month of the 6 years that you lived. You wake up in the morning, you know your friend, you see. And when you look at his face, you see many things. You see the sadness, you see the sorrow, you see the blaming, and you see someone which is completely broken. And what I do, I use that moment to flip it over, to tell them that we are not broken. We still have a chance, but let's just be together.
So to some extent, you had lost your home, your family, you had lost a lot of what makes us social human beings. I mean, your place in the world, more or less. And the one thing you had left was your ability to speak. And this is what you were willing to fight for to keep, as far as I understand, because you're saying people were broken, and I didn't want to be broken. And not to be broken meant that I needed to be able to continue speaking for myself.
I mean, honestly, let me also rephrase something. Like when we hear the word refugee, what comes to our mind first? When we hear the word the crisis of refugees in Africa, we think of it like, we think of it in a different way. And then when we hear about the crisis of the refugees in the Middle East, we think of it also a different way. And then in one simple word, that when we think of refugee, people were now trying to differentiate even refugees by using some people are vulnerable, others are not vulnerable. But to me personally, we use the word refugees to take some people's identity away and give them a new identity. And fair enough, you remove that identity, you give them the identity, they accept it. But what happened is that identity, the new identity that you give it to them, it's turning them to a numbers. It's turning them to a number that where, people use a database to collect numbers. People using, some other, terminology to describe them. So the fact is, if we, as the ones who has this new name, if we don't stand up and speak and use the platform that we get, I don't think people will get to know us. I don't think people even will be able to connect the East and the West together.
What you're describing there, to me, very much speaks of, how do you reduce people to bare life, to these are human beings that survive, but they're not necessarily citizens with political rights and a voice and so on. And you're describing what it is to be labeled a refugee. Now that you're out of a setting such as Australia, do you have the same perspective on that label, or is it a word that you would be more at ease with to say, well, I came here as a refugee? Or do you still feel it's a reductive or a diminishing label?
To me personally, as Aziz, I feel like I'm proud. I'm proud to use that name, the name that is being given to me, and I'm proud to fight and keep this name. I know I have my own names, but using the names like being as a refugee is not a shame. We have to accept. And this is one of the major issue now we have even among the refugee communities, that people are not able to accept the fact that the label that you had, you need to keep it. Don't be ashamed of using your labels. And many of them, they have a reason to not to keep their names, not to keep this label of refugee. Because when you come to the hosting countries, first you get, isolated from the community or the society. You don't get to, to integrate. You don't get to feel like you are really part of it. Because the moment you use that label of refugees, people will step away from you, which has become like, a painful that, and it's really hard for us to teach people if we don't accept even the label that, rather than, if we don't accept the label of the refugees first, we need to accept it, then we need to transfer to other people to teach them that, look, it's not bad to be a refugees. And we can give them some example that there are some refugees who are now today leading the world, politicians, business peoples, soccer players, celebrities, and they are refugees, and they are proud to be refugees.
Now going back to Manus. So you managed to establish contact with a journalist in Australia. You actually established contact with an NGO before that to speak of your situation. How did you manage to trust people that you didn't know when you were in a situation where I assume trust was very difficult to build towards those that were holding you there and so on? And you had to trust those people enough to be able to establish a contact and then to tell them rather personal things. So how did you manage to feel that they were trustworthy enough to engage in a dialogue with them?
To be honest, trust it doesn't exist in our dictionary back in the days. But the only one thing that which exists in our dictionary is we have nothing to lose. Because you have to connect the two experiences together. When you sign the death contract, and when I refer to death contract, which means when you get on the boat, you spend days and nights until you get to a point that you think, when you get to that point, that people will be there to save your life. But the fact is people were, they put you in a prisons, and then they start traumatizing you, which is a psychological, trauma, and then end up to like a systematical torture. So that takes the trust away, that takes the hopes away, that takes everything away from you. But one thing that will never take it away from you, which is I have nothing to lose. So for me, when I first time I sent an email to that an NGO CEO, Ian Rinto. What I did was, he asked me, how do you trust me? And I said, look, I have nothing to lose. If you are there to help, carry on. If you are not there to help, I will look for someone else. It doesn't bother me. And he said, what if I report you to the authorities? What else are they going to do? I'm already in a prison. So which means there's no difference. That's why when you are in a situation like that, don't think of trust and don't think of hope. All you can think of is, think of how to survive and how you can manage to send things out of where you are to the place where you want people to hear your voice.
You've been out for about a year now. How has it changed you to be in a different place? And then how has it been to leave, knowing that some people were left behind? So to some extent, you were among the lucky ones. And you were among the lucky ones, in part because you spoke. You became someone who was known. This is why you were granted an award. This is why you traveled to Switzerland, and this is why you were able to claim asylum. So all these elements are connected, and I would assume you have very mixed feelings because, of course you want to be out of there. But there's that tension because other people that you were speaking for were not able to leave when you were able to leave. So how did that leave you?
Well, if I can make it in a very simple way, I would say that left me with two things. Blame And I blame myself. That's the first time when I left the place. And the second thing as well, I start thinking of my my individual as this. I'm no longer there. And who will replace me and who will be in a position to carry on the fight. But the fact that also I promised myself that I'm not going to give up. It doesn't matter where you are, but you have to carry on. Because you started it, and then you have to finish it. But it looks like it's not going to finish. It's just going to go on and on and on and on. And as long as you're still alive, you're going to carry on with it. And back to me, I mean, I don't say that I was a lucky one. I mean, I don't use a luck here. This is not a luck. And the reason even why they got me out of there, based on what I did, and I didn't do it by myself. We did it together. We did it together as a collective people in that center. And when I came here, I made it very clear that I wanted to go back. Because the reason why I wanted to go back is I want to finish what is unfinished, what I have started already there. But again, when I changed my mind to stay here in Switzerland and seek for asylum, I just started to, make a balance of 6 years that I was there. I fought for so hard to get the attention of the international community because we felt that we've been completely ignored, not by the international community, but as well by some of the international media, as if like we don't exist. And then I came here to just draw the attention of the international community, to inform them that, look, people were locked up there, kids were locked up there. Several lives have been lost. Many mothers have suffered. And what is going on? Why we don't hear all the condemnations? Why we don't hear, anything about us here? And then I decided to stay here to be in a position where I can speak in an event like this. I can also speak in several other events to share not only my story, but our stories. And also to make it very, globally, because what we are seeing today it's a crisis, and the crisis is there from day one, and the number is increasing every day as we speak. And if someone like me, I made it all the way here through my struggle, and I'm still struggling, I think I will I will motivate several other people in a different direction to speak up for themselves. It's a time for us to speak up for ourselves. And when I blame myself, because I blame myself on the first few months when I decided to stay here, because it was so hard. It's a life decision, and I was not even prepared for it. I was notified 3 days before my departure that I'm leaving, which left me, in a limbo. I don't know whether I will stay, whether I will come back. They just told me you were leaving. And it's kind of like a very mixed feeling. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that I got this opportunity to stay here, and I'm glad that also I managed to put out what people were not aware of it.
So I'll apologize. You're absolutely right. I should not say you were the lucky one. You're right to correct my language.
No, it's all right.
No, but you're right. Obviously, you were not the lucky one in terms of finding yourself in such a situation. But to me, it's, and this is why I was speaking of attention, because there is a point where indeed you suddenly have a prospect that is giving you another platform to speak, but also means that there are other life opportunities and so on. If we come back to the question of who should be speaking for people, I wanted to hear you on how do you feel about the idea of being represented by others? Because this has been quite a trend in terms of using celebrities to speak for refugees, to bring attention to their cause and so on. And I was curious to hear you on how do you feel about that way of trying to attract attention to refugees themselves? Do you feel it's a compliment to the voice of refugees themselves? Do you feel it's overshadowing the voice of refugees themselves? So what's your perception of those goodwill ambassadors, so giving celebrities the floor to speak for refugees and in the name of refugees?
Well, firstly, let me say thank you for all those celebrities who took the initiative to stand up and speak. I mean, be the voice of the voiceless peoples, and also for being us a goodwill ambassadors. I think it's a great initiative that we saw. I mean, back in the years, we saw many celebrities. They stood up and they're trying to represent us. But the fact is, we have to think of it from a different angle, where the celebrities were speaking on our behalf for several years now. But what is the outcome? What is the outcome? And I know they're right when they took the initiative, because there is a media. They have the media attention. And also they are using their own, public, their supporters. Their supporters to draw their attentions, which is they're trying to connect. But I also think, like, for us as refugees, we were pushed back. It's not only pushing back, the society, Western society pushed us back. That's first thing. And then they took our identity away from us. And then they gave that identity to someone else, and someone else is using that identity. So we feel like we have no identity.
So you feel it's depriving you of your voice. It's depriving you of your ability to speak out and represent yourself, on the one hand. On the other hand, you're saying, well, thank you for trying to bring some attention. So how do you reconcile those two ideas?
Well, we are living in a very, complex world that we feel like those, the people, like the celebrities, they made us like, invisible. Because when they use the voice of the voiceless, they made us invisibles. But I think there are many other ways, many other channels that we could use, both as the celebrities and as the refugees, the people who have the voice, with the voice, the victims. We can team up together. And if we team up together, because we know today the medias are not interested to listen to the refugees. Because when you say refugees, media will think of two ways. Either they want to put some story of, an angry refugees who have really, really suffered a lot, or they want to put like a tragedy, or they want to put something else. But there are some, a good stories of the refugee where they need to be put it out there. But we don't get that platform, international platforms. And now we see that international platform owned by certain celebrities. And those celebrities now, they become goodwill ambassadors. But again, how can we connect the bridges between, East and West? So to connect the bridges between East and West, we need to team up. Each celebrity needs to team up with the refugees. Allowing them to use their own platforms. Teaming up with one of the celebrities, they can allow you to use their own platform. You can speak rather than the celebrities speaking on your behalf. Rather than their own word, it should be your own words. It should be your own story. No matter how you can tell your story, but it should be your own story, so that you can make people feel that it's me, humans, right? I'm capable to do what you do, and I am not invisible, I'm visible.
So you're saying that their fame and their platforms, they could use that to help refugees be heard. Rather than speak for refugees, they could speak with refugees, or put refugees forward, or put the stories of refugees forward, using the fact that they have a huge outreach, often a much greater outreach than just about anyone else.
I think, putting refugees forward, I think this is one of the best strategies. And what we need to do is we need to teach people. How can we teach people? We need to share our own stories. If we start to share our own stories, people will understand that how hard it is to leave your family behind, how hard it is to risk your life, how hard it is to leave your loved one somewhere around, and you completely, you completely blocked you're numbed your personal emotion, that even you don't have emotion no longer for your own family. Now you're struggling to build up your own life. You're struggling to build up your own life. You're struggling to prove to that hosting country that I'm a good person. I deserve this chance. Which means it makes you like in a situation, it's in a situation where you don't even get to think about your country anymore. You want to think about this place. And you always think about, what if I did something wrong? So this is also, it's a trauma by itself. And now if we ask the celebrities, if we can use that platform to communicate with people, people will get to know us. And we will get to know people so that we can help and make this world a better place.
If we take your specific example, is your sense that when you started engaging with the rest of the world, would it have helped if you had been able to use the platform of someone who's extremely followed and well-known? Was that an avenue that you ever explored? Because when I'm listening to you, you're saying, well, we can probably work together. There's probably a way that can be beneficial. Now, in a place like where you were, where it's very difficult to establish a contact with just about anyone, would that have been an option, to try to team up with someone who would have been able to carry forward your voice and make sure that you were being heard? Is that something you ever considered?
Well, I've never considered it. I've never considered, because I wasn't in a situation that I have option to consider it. I was in a situation, my goal was one, which is like, I need to get our voice out. I need to get our voice out. When we were not thinking about how far that voice can get, and we were not thinking about what kind of publicity are we going to get with that voice, all we were thinking about is how we can get our voice out. And then I can go back again to what I've said. We were living in a very, a very complex world where if you say refugees, you don't get platforms. Medias were not interested in your own stories. But as a celebrities, medias are interested in their stories. No matter what they do or what they say, the medias are still chasing the celebrities. Medias are still offering their, platform for celebrities. And then for the celebrities, if they can cooperate with one refugees, rather than I use the word, the voice of the voiceless, I can also bring someone that they are not voiceless. Mm-hmm. We do have a voice. We do have a voice. And also for the celebrities to say that those people, they have a voice. And I'm no longer going to be the voice of the voiceless, mm-hmm. but now I'm going to be the empowerment mm-hmm. of the voice peoples. So they have a voice. I can bring them up. I empower them. I offer them my platforms. Before my concert, maybe you can say a couple of words to the peoples, just to get the attention of the people that, okay, if the celebrity, she's really there, bringing someone in the platform, sharing the platform with the person, tomorrow many other celebrities will jump in and offer the same thing, rather than just we target them, voice of the voiceless, which means it's really like, to me personally, sometimes I feel like we've been dehumanized. That's kind of dehumanizations.
Mm-hmm. No, and to me, and this is why I was connecting it initially with the fact that you were given a number, you could not speak out. These are elements defining what we are as humans, having a name, having a voice, having a family, having a social circle, and so on. So it's removing from people what makes them human. So, and this is in part, I think, why it becomes so important to fight to be able to speak out. I think we're going to take some questions that came in while we were speaking. So the first question is about Manus Island and the current situation there. Someone's asking if there are still people in the detention center.
The current situation of Manus Island, thanks God that due to the our works, let me say, I don't know what to say to take the credit for it, our work. So Manus Island is completely, the clear was shut it down. And we have only 4 guys, they are still on Manus, but some of them, they have some, cases with the authority on the islands. And the rest of the people now, they were moved from Manus Island to Port Moresby, the capital city of Papua New Guinea. And they were accommodated in the hotels, and some of them, they were under process to go to United States. Some were also hosted by, few countries in Europe, such as Canada, Norway, France as well. Recently, they extend their arm to take. And we are still also trying to reach out to, as many European countries to ask if there's an opportunity to reach out for those people who are still in Port Moresby. So overall, we have roughly about 200, plus people are, they're still in Port Moresby.
Another question. How festivals and artistic cultural events can help to avoid the appropriation of causes by non-concerned people? And I assume non-concerned people is a reference to celebrities that may not be directly involved, but that's my very personal translation of that question.
To be honest, festival, let me say, art and literature were the things that we've used a lot on Manus Island. A friend of mine who goes by the name of Baruz Bichani, he managed to write a book, via WhatsApps. And also he managed to, he managed to speak to many people, to reach out to many universities. And I myself, I did the same thing, many rallies, many concerts. So today, when you're talking about that relevant, the concerts and the artistics are the place where we have a peoples, where you have a people who comes there, meaning hundreds of thousands of people turns up for every, individual celebrities. And if that individual celebrities, even if he has nothing to do with what is happening, if he can say a couple of words, I think we will draw the attention of the people. Because we have two types of people today, even here in the Western countries. We have people who knows what does it mean to be a refugees, and they have people who are really have no idea even at all. They just all they know.
Refugees.
Yeah, they have no idea even what it means to be refugees. Mm-hmm. So now is the position, if we can ask the artists in their festival to use their own platform, at least to raise awareness, we can teach these people who have no idea about refugees. You can at least learn something about refugees. Tomorrow, rather than you push the person away, you can hug him, offer him a place. Let's share the place together, rather than I push you away. Let's exchange cultural, and I can help you even to integrate. You learn from me and I learn from you. And that's the way how we can even build this wall. Otherwise, we just now seeing that every day we listen to the media and we panic by the numbers that are increasing. Today we have 7.8 million people still displaced, and the number is just going on and on and on. And then we have now what happened here in Greece. Europe are shaking. Mm-hmm. So there's always a way we can communicate with those people to tell them that, look, our leaders are in a position who are making a decision there. They have no idea about what's the current situation. They're just making their own decisions. So what we need is we need to get people to come up and tell their electorate, tell their leaders that, look, that's not what, it's not right, your decision. You have to change that decision. Make it easier. Make it easier for people to access travel.
I find it interesting because you were speaking of two categories, people who know about refugees and their experiences, and those who don't. Whereas I would probably have added a third category about people who fear refugees, regardless of knowing about their experience. But when you're describing the reaction in Europe, it's often a reaction of fear that is usually not grounded in an in-depth understanding of people's experience. But I think you also have that group of people that may not know about refugees, but may be very inclined to fear refugees arriving in their countries. So,
I think yes. There's also a group of people who are fear of refugees, and there are also people who are silent. Mm-hmm. There's also people who are silent. So the people who fear of refugees, I believe they haven't had a good educations about refugees completely. They had a completely different, a lesson about refugees, and which dictated by maybe such a few individuals, or even like dictated by such a, the media, because media play big roles, and also media put fear in people's hearts. And if one thing say it's wrong, people will just start thinking about it like, whoa, this is going to be like a colonizations. Mm. right? And I can also say a few things. This has happened when we were on Manus, that I was, during my intervention in the university event, they asked me to speak, and one of the students asked me a question, like, we've been hearing this sort of, a colonization, which is Eastern colonization coming to us, or like Asian colonizations. How do you, do you think that is it right to say things like that?
You mean reverse colonization?
Well, it's like they're saying reverse colonizations. That's the thing. So my answer to her was, that's not a reverse colonizations. How do we even say colonization? When we talk about colonization, we are talking about a different subject. So for the people who are really fear of refugees, I believe that they have no knowledge of refugees. They have no connection with the refugees. So it's our duty as refugees, it's our duty for those who have a voice, those refugees who have a voice, to teach them. And I'm one of the people that I'm really happy to sit with one-on-one with everyone who wants to know about refugee. I can give you a big background. And that led me I went to Greece by myself, and I was in Moria with the refugees, and what I saw, something which was really, really shaking me. Personally, I was shocked. Despite even I'm someone I suffered 6 years, but what I saw there was completely changed my, understanding. And also make me feel like there's a lot need to be done in this world. And if I'm not going to be the solutions, I can contribute with my own voice. There are many other people who are really fighting so hard. I can contribute.
That's a last question, but you've just said that you were shocked when you went to Moria, whereas I would have assumed that someone who spent years on Manus Island would probably not be shocked. So what was different and shocking?
The difference was, I have never had a chance to dig deeper into what is happening in Europe here, especially about the refugees. And I had a different thought, a different view about how, some of the Europes, treating refugees. The only image that I had is 2015, where the door is open, 1 million people are resettled. That's the only image I had. But when I stepped into Moria,
there was a strong contrast.
There's a strong contrast. And the contrast was, I thought that people would be offered a shelter. People were offered food. The basic needs like medical treatments and all this stuff. But when I stepped into Moria, I walked from the point to the other point, and I stayed for few days, keep going in and out. One thing that I learned, it's either Europe's, they're aware of what is happening in Greece and they're just pretending that they have no idea, or they are complicit with the Greece government, and they left Greece alone on that position. Because what I saw there, especially what shocked me, is the kids and the women. In Nauru, in Manus Island, thanks God, we don't have a kids or neither women. But in Nauru, women were offered a privacy. Women were offered, at least a space where she know that that's her space. But there's no privacy. In Moria here, and we're speaking about Europe, in Moria here, there's no privacy. Women and kids, girls wearing diapers to sleep at nighttime.
So they didn't have to go out.
They didn't have to go out because there's a lack of security. So all of these things we see there, it's just, shaking for someone like me. And I know people would think like he's a crazy. It's traumatizing. Well, it's not traumatizing. I want to compare my experience. I'm a human being, and I'm someone who really open to learn about what is happening. I learn about how the Western liberal democratic country like Australia treat refugees. That's my first-hand experience. Then now I'm turning to see in Europe here, which means there's no difference. And even Europe, it's at certain point, it's even worse than Australia. Worse than Australia, which means they're trying to copy Australian human rights abuse, but also they're trying to be very careful that they don't get to criticize, and they just play the game of, okay, it's Greece, your problems. And I can call out in this event tonight that Greece should not be left alone. Europe, this is your responsibility. And I urge all the leaders in Europe that to step in and share this responsibility, because you cannot leave Greece there alone. I mean, and if you leave Greece alone, it's just you're ruining the entire reputation of Europe.
There's a last question for me, actually. I take it before giving your last word, but the question is, I work for the ICRC. The question is, why has the ICRC decided not to use celebrities? The short answer to, well, actually, the long answer to that is that there have been several discussions in the ICRC about, do we attract attention to certain crises through using celebrities? The answer has always been, no, we think people need to speak for themselves, or in the worst cases, we will speak of what we see on the ground when we need to attract attention to a specific crisis. But no, we don't think celebrities, we should be teaming up with celebrities to do that. It's a discussion that happens sporadically, so I can't say it's a decision that's been taken for good. My sense is that we should not be using celebrities, but I would say that there is an ongoing discussion. But clearly, until now, there's been a decision to not use celebrities to attract attention to a specific crisis. So that was the ICRC question. I would like to close by asking you to speak a bit of what comes next for you. What do you foresee in the coming years? I understand that you are going to keep fighting for refugee causes. I'd like to know how you foresee the next few years.
Well, I know one of the things that I said before, like, I mean, I don't think of the coming years, because I always think about what I will do tomorrow, and I always like in a position to respond when there is a crisis. So for me, basically, what I wanted to do is, I want to build up a space where I can empower people. I mean, use my own experience and also empower people to speak up. I want people to step up and speak, because people are now, most of the refugees now, they are dying in shame. And they are also, locking themselves, and they keep their trauma for themselves, and which is really bad, which is really hurt. I went through that, myself, and I experienced it. And now I live here in Switzerland, but sometimes I feel like at certain moments, I go back to Manus. Certain moments, I go back to Moria. Like that's the thing. It's a common feeling. So building that space also will help me to bring as many refugees as I can, to empower them to speak for themselves. And also, we want to be part of the decision makers. This is one of the important things, that we don't get to see ourselves in that round tables. Today, like, if we're speaking of, all the UN charter bases, start with the, IOM, UNHCR, when they are making a decision, closing a decision with the states, we don't get to see ourselves in that round table. We want to see ourselves there. We want to be in a position with you, so that whatever comes out of that decision, we have our own way to communicate with the people. Because today, if I say something and you say something, will be completely different when it comes to the understandable of the refugees. If you say it, yes, but it's still people will never take it serious as I say it. Why? Because I was in their shoes. I lived with them for several years under that experience. So anything that comes out of me, that will be people taking out. So that's why I urge, all the NGOs who are really working on that direction, helping refugees, try to do your best to have refugees in round tables.
I said that was the last question, but I have another one for you. I would completely agree with you on the fact that refugees need to be sitting at those tables. However, for the time being, what tends to happen is when refugees are invited to those tables, they're there as a symbol, more than as people who will really have a strong word to say in decisions that are taken. And it's become quite usual to ensure that you have, if you're going to have a discussion about refugees, to have a refugee at the table. The challenge I see there is that they're still, in most cases, not the people taking the decisions. So there's often a sense of, tokenism with having someone to speak for refugees and bring that voice, but they don't always have the influence that they would need in those discussions. So to me, you need to go a step further. There has to be more power granted to those people. It's not only about being able to sit at the table, but it's also about having a voice that will influence decisions that are taken at the table. So I kind of wanted to hear you on how you see those voices influencing discussions, because I mean, I attend to a lot of those international discussions on various topics, and that integration to me is still not working very well, because you have your decision makers and then you will have a refugee at the table to give his or her perspective. But it's not necessarily deeply influencing the decisions that are being taken.
Because we never think that the refugees are capable to do things for themselves. That's the reason why they are not. Their words is not really being taken as seriously. People think that we are not capable. We don't understand how. I mean, we don't understand about the mechanism, the UN mechanism. We don't understand about, the international law. But the fact is, having refugees in the round tables for certain in NGOs, what they need to do is they don't need to, tells the individual what to say in that round tables. They need to offer him a space. Let him even say, even if 2 words out of his own personal understanding, he will say. And if you want him to be as a vocal, and as effective in that round tables, you need to empower that person. What we are looking for is an empowerment. Empower them and let them speak. And I can say other things that in the Human Rights Council today, we don't have a refugee who have an ECOSOC to speak there. So you have to go through an NGOs. And then coming through an NGOs that there are certain things that you don't need to say it, and there are certain things you should say it. First, they will ask you to soften your language. Second, you have to control, you have to be diplomatic. The fact that they don't let you dig deeper inside you and share what is inside, what is really hurting you, what is really eating you inside out. So that's the thing. What we need to do is we need to offer a space without restrictions, a space without lines. Because they know that even the refugees, they are aware that they are not going to cross the line. But all they will do is, look, I know my limits, and I want to say, the person who I am sharing my ideas with, he's a human being like me. He has a feeling. I don't want to go and talk to you about the paper. No, I don't want to talk to you about what law says. I want to talk to you as a human being. And I want to put you in a position that to imagine yourself, or imagine one of your family member or relative. If he was in that situation, what would you do? Simple questions. And you will see the person will start mumbling. I know there's a rule, I know there's everything, but at the end of the day, we need to have the human connection. That's who we are. As a human beings, if we don't have that connections, papers are nothing. Papers are just a rule set it out by other people who have no idea what it means for someone to cross the ocean. Imagine putting one of your family member in the boat and ask him to cross the ocean, 5 days or 6 days in the ocean. How does that feel? You will feel that you will never forgive yourself. So once again, I will say, the space that we offer for refugees, number one, we need to empower refugees. We don't need to tell them what to say, but we need to let them say what they want to say. We need to let them share their story, their pain with the world. Let the people know that how I feel. And I know people will ask me, are you feel upset? Are you upset that you have lost 6 years of your life? To be honest, I'm not upset. If I'm upset, I wouldn't be in this chair today. So I wanted to share this with you, that even though I've lost 6 years of my life, but still I'm willing to lose more. If I could able to save one person's life, I'm able to lose more and more.
Aziz, thank you so much for this conversation.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your time.